Quinn Blackwood stared at the holographic assignment briefing floating before her eyes and wondered, not for the first time, why she hadn't pursued a nice normal career in waste management. "Let me get this straight," she said, pinching the bridge of her nose. "The Galactic Emperor, ruler of 17 quadrants and self-proclaimed most magnificent being in the known universe, wants me to feed his cat." The Imperial attaché, a 7-foot-tall avian being named Crix, ruffled his iridescent feathers in what Quinn had learned was the Plexian equivalent of nervous sweating. "Not precisely a cat as your Earth taxonomy would define it," Crix clarified, his translator implant giving his voice a posh British accent that seemed wildly incongruous with his raptor-like appearance. "The Emperor's collection houses the most dangerous and exotic creatures from across the cosmos. The specimen in question merely bears some passing resemblance to your feline pets according to ancient records." Quinn leaned back in her chair, which automatically adjusted to her posture. Must be nice, she thought, to have furniture that costs more than her entire home planet's GDP. And why me? I'm just a troubleshooter. My resume says specialty in cross-species logistics, not suicidal animal handler. Crix's head swiveled unnervingly, his golden eyes blinking vertically. "The creature has not been successfully fed in 3,821 standard years. 273 different species have attempted contact. The mortality rate is concerning." "Concerning," Quinn repeated flatly. "As in, 100%, Crix replied with the casual tone of someone discussing mildly unfavorable weather. "But humans have shown remarkable aptitude for handling dangerous biological anomalies. Your species possesses what our behavioral scientists call chaotic intuition." Quinn snorted. "Is that the scientific term for expendable enough to risk getting eaten?" Crix had the decency to look embarrassed, though with a beak it was hard to tell. "The compensation package is substantial, enough to purchase a small moon in the outer rim should you succeed. And if I fail, your next of kin will receive a lovely commemorative plaque." Quinn sighed and stood up, smoothing down her standard-issue Explorer jumpsuit, which had "human" helpfully printed on the back in 27 languages. "When do I start?" Crix's feathers relaxed slightly. "Immediately. The Emperor is most eager to resolve this situation. The specimen's containment field requires significant energy resources, and His Magnificence finds the creature's perpetual hunger disruptive to the feng shui of his collection." As they walked toward the transport tube, Quinn noticed a line of alien officials watching her with expressions ranging from scientific curiosity to what she could only interpret as pity. A bulbous gelatinous being oozed forward, its translator badge emitting a gurgling voice. "Another one for the whisker grief," it said to its companion. "At least this one walks on only 2 appendages." The 8-legged diplomat from Arachnar 9 took nearly an hour to perish. "I can hear you," Quinn called out. "Super encouraging, thanks." The gelatinous being rippled in what might have been embarrassment and retreated. Crix guided her into the transport tube. "Please disregard Administrator Blubbs. He has witnessed many failed attempts." "Oh great," Quinn muttered as the tube doors sealed. "So it has a name, Whisker Grief." "A rough translation," Crix explained as the transport accelerated smoothly. "In the original High Zeltonian, it's a 20-minute vocal sequence that causes minor psychosis in most sentient beings." Quinn closed her eyes and took a deep breath. "You know what, let's stick with Alien Cat. My sanity has enough problems already." The transport slowed to a stop, and the doors opened to reveal a vast gleaming corridor lined with containment fields. Inside each one, Quinn caught glimpses of creatures that defied description, things with too many limbs, too many eyes, or disturbingly not enough of either. "Welcome," Crix announced with practiced ceremony, "to the Emperor's grand xenological collection, the largest assemblage of unique lifeforms in the known universe." Quinn stepped out, feeling the weight of 3,821 years of failure settling uncomfortably on her shoulders. "Let's meet this cat." The Emperor's grand xenological collection, despite its grandiose name, smelled suspiciously like a poorly maintained zoo. Quinn wrinkled her nose as Crix led her through winding corridors of increasingly bizarre creatures. "Is that thing inside out?" Quinn asked, pointing at a pulsating mass of what appeared to be organs floating in a violet suspension field. "Ah, the noble viscera of Deltron 5, Crix explained cheerfully. "They evolved to wear their digestive systems externally, highly efficient, if somewhat aesthetically challenging." "Right," Quinn muttered. "Very noble." They passed exhibits containing creatures made of living crystal, gaseous entities, swirling in specialized chambers, and something that looked disturbingly like a standard-issue office chair, until it bared rows of needle-like teeth. So Quinn ventured, attempting conversation to distract from the growing sense of doom. The Emperor collects dangerous aliens as pets. Crix's feathers bristled slightly. His magnificence prefers the term living cultural artifacts. Each specimen represents a unique evolutionary path, preserved for scientific study and imperial prestige. And how many of these artifacts have eaten their caretakers? Only 37 species have demonstrated actively predatory behavior toward collection staff, Crix answered promptly, a remarkably low percentage, considering we house over 12,000 specimens. Comforting, Quinn said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. They turned down a quieter corridor marked with pulsing red warning lights. The walls here were noticeably thicker, the security measures more intense. Quinn spotted automated defense turrets recessed into the ceiling. We're approaching the high-security wing, Crix whispered, his voice dropping several decibels, home to our most challenging residents. At the end of the corridor stood a large reinforced door flanked by two massive guard droids. As Quinn approached, their optical sensors focused on her with an audible whir. Human detected, one announced in a rumbling bass. Threat assessment, minimal. Survival probability, negligible. Thanks for the vote of confidence, Quinn replied. The doors slid open to reveal an elderly alien hunched over a control panel. At least, Quinn assumed he was elderly. His pale blue skin was deeply wrinkled, and 3 of his 4 eyes were clouded with cataracts. He wore an elaborate white coat covered in stains of various colors, some of which seemed to be moving. Dr. Voltor, Crix announced, may I present Quinn Blackwood, the human specialist sent by Central Command. Dr. Voltor turned slowly, his one good eye widening as it focused on Quinn. A human, to feed the whisker grief. How unexpected. His voice sounded like gravel being crushed underfoot, and Quinn got the distinct impression he'd been smoking something toxic for several centuries. That's me, designated sacrifice reporting for duty, Quinn said with a mock salute. The ancient scientist shuffled closer, examining her with unconcealed curiosity. 700 years I've worked here, seen 19 different feeding attempts. The whisker grief consumed a graviton monk in under 6 seconds, and they're mostly conceptual beings. Sounds delightful, Quinn said. What does it eat, exactly? Dr. Voltor's wrinkled face creased further with what might have been a smile. That's the question, isn't it? We've tried everything from pure energy to dark matter, conventional biomass, unconventional biomass, sentient biomass, non-sentient biomass. I'm getting a theme here, Quinn interrupted, and I'm not loving it. Dr. Voltor gestured toward a reinforced viewport at the far end of the room. Perhaps you should see for yourself. The containment area is through there. We observe from a safe distance. As Quinn approached the viewport, she noticed warning signs plastered across the walls in dozens of alien scripts. One in English read, danger, reality distortion possible, no telepaths, empaths, organ beings with more than 3 temporal dimensions beyond this point. Through the viewport, Quinn could see a massive circular chamber. In its center floated what appeared to be a shimmering bubble of pure darkness, roughly the size of a small car. Occasional flickers of something moved within, something with too many angles and not enough physics. That's the cat? Quinn asked, her voice suddenly dry. Dr. Voltor made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a death rattle. We have no idea what it actually looks like. The containment field distorts visible light, but according to the first contact records from nearly 4 millennia ago, it purred when touched by the original collection team. Crix cleared his throat delicately, before it absorbed them into its molecular structure, of course. Quinn pressed her palm against the cool viewport glass, studying the shifting darkness. Has anyone ever actually survived an encounter? No, Dr. Voltor replied bluntly, but the Emperor is most insistent that we continue trying. The energy requirements for the containment field increase each year. The creature appears to be hungry. Quinn turned back to face them both. Show me the previous attempts. I want to see exactly what I'm dealing with. Dr. Voltor nodded solemnly and shuffled toward a console. Very well, though I warn you, the footage is not for the faint of heart. I once watched all of ancient Earth's reality television in a single sitting, Quinn replied grimly. Trust me, I can handle it. As Dr. Voltor called up the historical records, Quinn couldn't shake the feeling that the darkness in the chamber had shifted slightly, as though becoming aware of her presence. She could have sworn she heard, ever so faintly, the sound of purring. Dr. Valtor's gnarled fingers danced across the console with surprising dexterity for someone who looked old enough to have witnessed the formation of several small planets. A holographic display flickered to life, showing a timestamp from 2,944 years ago. This was attempt number 42, Dr. Valtor explained. A crystal void diplomat. Their species can withstand the vacuum of space and temperatures approaching absolute zero. The footage showed a crystalline being approaching the dark bubble with what Quinn interpreted as confidence. It extended a translucent appendage toward the containment field. Watch closely, Dr. Valtor whispered. The moment contact was made, the darkness rippled. There was no flash, no dramatic special effect, just a subtle distortion in reality itself. 1 second the crystal void was there. The next it had become a fine glittering dust that hung in the air for a moment before settling to the floor. That was anticlimactic, Quinn observed, trying to mask her growing unease. Try this one, Dr. Valtor suggested, switching to another file. The Hyperborg Collective, attempt 97, only 600 years ago. They volunteered a drone equipped with 17 redundant defense systems. This footage showed a mechanical being covered in blinking lights and weaponry. It rolled confidently toward the darkness, weapons primed. This time, the darkness seemed to yawn open. The drone rolled in and vanished. The darkness contracted with what Quinn could only describe as a satisfied shudder. Did it just eat the robot? She asked. Dr. Valtor nodded. Down to the last quark. We found no trace readings afterward. Show me the most recent attempt, Quinn requested, leaning closer to the display. The timestamp on this footage was from just 50 years ago. A gelatinous being that resembled a giant amoeba approached the containment field, carrying what appeared to be an offering, a swirling ball of pure energy. The Morphians believed the creature might respond to a gift of concentrated stellar plasma, Crix explained. Their ambassador volunteered personally. On screen, the gelatinous ambassador extended its pseudopod, offering the energy ball toward the darkness. For a moment, the darkness remained still. Then, faster than Quinn's eyes could track, a tendril shot out from the bubble, not dark at all, but a color Quinn's brain couldn't process, and wrapped around both the offering and the ambassador. When the tendril retracted, nothing remained. The Emperor was most displeased, Crix said quietly. That was the 37th diplomatic incident caused by the Whisker Grief. Relations with the Morphian Collective remain strained. Quinn stepped back from the display, processing what she'd seen. This thing doesn't just eat its food. It unmakes it, like it's breaking down reality itself. Dr. Valtor's wrinkled face broke into what might have been a smile. Precisely, most beings see only a dangerous predator. You see the fundamental nature of the problem. He turned to Crix. Perhaps this human has potential after all. Quinn paced the observation room, her mind racing. Has anyone tried, I don't know, asking it what it wants to eat? Crix and Dr. Valtor exchanged glances. Attempted communication with the Whisker Grief has been unproductive, Crix explained diplomatically. The last telepathic species to try made contact for approximately 0.3 seconds before its entire neural network collapsed. The autopsy showed its brain had been reconfigured into a non-Euclidean geometry. Lovely, Quinn muttered. She turned back to the viewport, studying the shifting darkness. What about its origins? Where did this thing come from? Dr. Valtor shuffled to another console and pulled up an ancient-looking star chart. The original collection team found it in the Void Nexus, a region between galaxies where the normal laws of physics take suggestions rather than orders. And they thought, hey, let's bring home the scary space anomaly. Because, came a new voice from the doorway. It was the only one of its kind ever discovered. Quinn turned to see a tall, elegantly dressed alien with silver skin, and 6 arms each adorned with ceremonial jewelry. The guards and Crix immediately bowed deeply. Grand Archivist Thalox, Crix breathed. We weren't expecting a representative of the Imperial Court. Quinn remained standing, earning a sharp look from Crix. Human posture is terrible, she explained with a shrug. Can't bow without throwing my back out. The Grand Archivist's mouth twitched in what might have been amusement. The Emperor has taken a personal interest in this attempt, he explained. fixing Quinn with eyes that seemed to contain spiral galaxies. The whisker grief represents the crown jewel of the collection. A truly unique entity, its continued hunger has become problematic. Quinn crossed her arms. So this isn't just about feeding a pet. What's really going on? The Grand Archivist studied her for a long moment, then sighed, a sound like wind through crystal chimes. Our scientists believe the creature is growing. Each failed feeding attempt strengthens it. The containment field now requires the energy output of 3 neutron stars to maintain. And if the containment fails, Quinn asked, already guessing the answer, at minimum this sector of the galaxy would experience what we scientifically term a catastrophic reality inversion. Dr. Valtor supplied helpfully. At worst, well, existence becomes optional. Quinn looked back at the shifting darkness, which now seemed to be vaguely oriented toward her. If a formless void could have a front, has anyone just tried? I don't know. Normal cat food. The silence that followed was so profound that Quinn could hear the hum of the facility's power systems. Normal cat food, Crix repeated slowly, as if she'd suggested using interpretive dance to solve a complex mathematical equation. Yeah, you know, fish, mice, that sort of thing. If it looks somewhat like a cat and purrs like a cat, we have attempted offering 64 distinct species of living organisms, the Grand Archivist stated. None survived contact with the containment field. Quinn rubbed her temples, feeling the beginning of a headache. Let me think this through. So this thing exists partially outside normal reality, consumes anything that touches it, and has been described as cat-like by exactly one person who was promptly eaten by it. She turned back to the viewport. As she stared at the darkness, Quinn could have sworn it stared back, not with malice, but with something that felt uncomfortably like expectation. And then in a moment of what Crix would later document as chaotic human intuition, but what Quinn would call an absolutely ridiculous hunch, she understood what no one else had in nearly 4 millennia. I know what your cat wants, she said quietly. All 3 aliens looked at her with expressions ranging from skepticism to desperate hope. What it needs, Quinn continued, a small smile forming, is attention. Attention. The Grand Archivist's voice carried the kind of polite disbelief reserved for small children claiming they've invented time travel using only crayons and a cardboard box. You believe a reality-warping cosmic anomaly that has consumed 273 beings from across the galaxy is lonely. Quinn nodded, warming to her theory. Think about it. Every approach has been about feeding it something. Has anyone ever just tried, petting it? Dr. Valter's remaining functional eye twitched violently. Petting it, he repeated flatly. Petting the entity that converted a quantum warlock into his component quarks. Look, I know how it sounds, Quinn said, holding up her hands. But cats, Earth cats anyway, don't just eat. They're social creatures. They need stimulation, affection, play. Crix's feathers rippled in what Quinn now recognized as extreme anxiety. The creature has been contained in isolation for nearly 4 millennia. Exactly. Quinn snapped her fingers. Imagine being stuck in a bubble for thousands of years with nothing to do except occasionally consume whatever unfortunate being gets shoved your way. You'd be cranky too. The Grand Archivist folded his 6 arms in a complex pattern that somehow communicated deep skepticism. And you propose to, what, exactly? Scratch it behind its non-existent ears. Something like that, Quinn replied, turning to Dr. Valter. I need some equipment. Equipment, he echoed weakly. Yes. I need a laser pointer, some kind of stick with something dangly on the end, a box, and something that makes noise when squeezed. The 3 aliens stared at her as if she'd asked for the Emperor's crown jewels to make a sandwich. A laser pointer, Dr. Valter repeated. You intend to direct coherent light at a being that exists partially in 11 dimensions. Trust me, Quinn said, if there's one constant in the universe, it's that cats, even potentially universe-ending ones, can't resist a moving red dot. 2 hours later, Quinn stood in the preparation chamber, surrounded by the strangest collection of items ever assembled for a scientific mission. The facility's fabrication units had produced approximations of everything she'd requested. The laser pointer was actually a modified quantum targeting system that the military used for precision strikes. The stick with something dangly was a ceremonial staff with an ornamental tassel that belonged to someone important enough that Crix refused to name them. The box was a simple containment cube, and the squeaky toy was a stress relief device from the facility's recreation area. Quinn had also requested a specially designed suit, which Dr. Valter's team had cobbled together with visible reluctance. It looked like a standard hazard suit, but with numerous modifications based on Quinn's specifications. I still don't understand why the suit needed to be this configuration, Crick said, eyeing the outfit with confusion. It's simple, Quinn explained, zipping up the front. If this thing has any cat-like instincts at all, it will respond to familiar shapes and movements. The suit was padded in strategic places to give Quinn a vaguely feline silhouette. The helmet featured two pointed protrusions on top, mimicking ears. Most bizarrely, a long flexible tube extended from the back, ending in a fluffy attachment. A tail, Dr. Valter observed, his wrinkled face contorted with scientific confusion. You've given yourself a tail. Exactly. Quinn picked up her array of cat toys. And these aren't weapons or offerings, they're toys. The Grand Archivist, who had been silently observing the preparations, finally spoke. In 4,000 years of imperial scientific research, no one has attempted this approach. That's because you've all been thinking like scientists, Quinn replied, tapping her helmet. I'm thinking like a cat owner. A team of robotic assistants had been assembled to observe the attempt, each equipped with sensors to record whatever data they could before being inevitably destroyed. Quinn had named them all after Earth cats: Whiskers, Mittens, Fluffy, and Chairman Meow. The observation drones have a projected survival time of 8 seconds in proximity to the Whisker Grief, Dr. Valter informed her. Use them wisely. Quinn hefted her equipment bag over her shoulder. Any last words of advice before I go in? Dr. Valter considered this for a moment. Try not to be unmade too painfully. The cleanup is tedious. Your confidence is overwhelming, Quinn muttered. The Grand Archivist approached, his silver skin gleaming under the harsh lights. Human Quinn, should you succeed, the Emperor has authorized me to grant you anything within reason as reward. How about a nice beach house on Earth and enough credits to never work again? Easily arranged. Quinn took a deep breath. And if I fail, your species will receive a formal commendation for your brave sacrifice, and we will name the next doomed feeding attempt in your honor. Touching. Crick stepped forward, awkwardly patting Quinn's shoulder with the tip of his wing. For what it's worth, I find your theory less implausible than it initially seemed. That might be the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me, Quinn replied with a grin. All right, let's do this. Open the door. The massive security door to the containment chamber slid open with a hiss, revealing the anteroom that would lead to the Whisker Grief's enclosure. Quinn turned back one last time. If I don't make it back, tell the Emperor his cat sitter rates are way too low. With that she stepped through, the door sealing behind her with the finality of a tomb. In the observation room, the three aliens watched the monitors as Quinn advanced toward the final door. The Grand Archivist leaned toward Dr. Valter. What do you calculate her chances to be, Dr. Valter's ancient face crinkled with concentration. Based on historical data and the complete absurdity of her approach, approximately 0.00001%. The Grand Archivist nodded solemnly. So you're saying there's a chance? The final door to the containment chamber slid open with a hydraulic hiss that seemed unnecessarily dramatic to Quinn. Bright warning lights flashed, and an automated voice announced in 27 languages that she was about to die horribly. Standard procedure apparently. Very encouraging, Quinn muttered as she stepped through the doorway. The chamber itself was vast, much larger than it had appeared through the viewport. The ceiling soared at least 50 meters overhead, and the circular room had to be 100 meters in diameter. In the center floated the containment bubble, a perfect sphere of darkness that somehow managed to look both solid and permeable at the same time. Quinn's suit sensors immediately began screaming warnings about radiation, reality fluctuations, and something labeled existential probability disruption, which sounded made up but probably wasn't. Okay team, Quinn said to the floating drones, spread out and keep recording as long as you can. The 4 drones, Whiskers, Mittens, Fluffy, and Chairman Meow, bobbed in acknowledgement and took up positions around the chamber. Quinn could hear Dr. Valtor's nervous breathing through her comm system. Approaching the containment field, she narrated, more for her own comfort than for the observers. No sign of hostility yet. The entity appears, dormant. The darkness within the bubble seemed to pulse slightly, almost like breathing. As Quinn drew closer, she could feel a strange pressure in her head, not painful but disorienting, Like trying to comprehend a four-dimensional object with a three-dimensional brain. I'm approximately 5 meters from the edge of the field, she continued. Beginning Phase 1 of Operation Kitty Playtime. From her equipment bag, Quinn withdrew the quantum laser pointer. She activated it, and a bright red dot appeared on the floor about half a meter from the containment bubble. Nothing happened. Quinn moved the dot closer to the bubble, then slowly began tracing circles around it. No response to the laser stimulus, she reported. Moving to Phase 2. She put away the laser pointer and took out the ceremonial staff with its ornate tassel. With a gentle motion, she began waving it near the edge of the bubble, making the tassel dance and flutter. For a heart-stopping moment, the darkness within the bubble seemed to shift, rotating slightly to track the movement. Movement detected, Quinn whispered. The entity is responding to the toy. Dr. Valtor's excited voice crackled through her comms. Fascinating. We're recording unprecedented fluctuations in the quantum field. Continue, human. Quinn continued waving the staff, gradually moving it closer to the bubble. The darkness shifted again, more decisively this time, stretching toward the tassel without quite touching it. It's working, Quinn breathed. It's actually working. She took a cautious step forward, still waving the staff. She was now close enough that she could feel the containment field. A static-like sensation against her exposed skin. I'm going to attempt direct interaction, she announced. Quinn, that's too risky. Crix's panicked voice came through the comms. No being has survived direct contact. No being has tried playing with it before. Quinn countered. She laid the staff down carefully and reached into her bag for the squeaky toy. Beginning Phase 3. She squeezed the toy, which emitted a high-pitched squeak that echoed through the chamber. The reaction was immediate and startling. The darkness within the bubble contracted sharply, then expanded to press against the containment field's limits. The bubble itself distorted, stretching into an elliptical shape. It's responding. Quinn couldn't keep the excitement from her voice. It's trying to reach the sound. She squeezed the toy again, and the darkness pressed harder against its prison, creating ripples in the containment field that made Quinn's vision blur. The containment field is holding at 87% stability, Dr. Valtor reported, his voice tight with tension. But it's never reacted this strongly before. Quinn took a deep breath and implemented the most dangerous part of her plan. She knelt down, placed the squeaky toy directly before her, and began making soft clicking sounds with her tongue against the roof of her mouth. The universal sound humans make when calling a cat. Pass, pass, she called softly. Here, kitty kitty. The darkness froze. The ripples in the containment field stopped abruptly. For several terrifying seconds, nothing happened. Then slowly, a tendril of darkness extended from the main mass, pressing delicately against the containment field. Unlike the violent breaches shown in the historical footage, this was gentle, almost curious. It's responding to my voice, Quinn whispered in awe. The tendril pressed harder, causing the field to dimple inward. Warning alarms blared throughout the facility. Containment field at 64%, and dropping, Dr. Valtor shouted. Quinn, you need to retreat immediately. But Quinn remained kneeling, transfixed by the tendril that now extended far enough to almost touch her outstretched hand. It's okay, she said softly, both to the observers and to the entity. It doesn't want to hurt me. It's just reaching out. The containment field dimpled further, stretching like a membrane between Quinn's fingers and the darkness beyond. The tendril, which up close had an impossible geometry that hurt Quinn's eyes to look at directly, paused just shy of contact. I think, Quinn said slowly. It wants permission. Before anyone could stop her, Quinn pressed her fingertips against the containment field. The field parted like water, allowing her fingers to pass through. There was no pain, no disintegration, just a profound sense of connectedness as her flesh made contact with the darkness. And then, clear as day, everyone in the observation room heard it through Quinn's comms. A deep resonant purring that seemed to vibrate at a frequency that made reality itself shudder. It's purring, Quinn said, unable to keep the wonder from her voice. It actually is a cat. Just, not a cat as we understand cats. The tendril wrapped gently around Quinn's hand, neither consuming nor harming her. Instead, it seemed to be nuzzling her. The whisker grief is responding to physical contact without consuming the subject, the Grand Archivist's stunned voice came through the comms. This is unprecedented in Imperial scientific records. The darkness shifted again, extending more tendrils that wove around Quinn's arm without constricting. The purring grew louder, and to Quinn's astonishment, the containment field began to stabilize. Containment field returning to normal parameters. Dr. Valtor reported, his voice heavy with disbelief. It's reinforcing its own prison. Quinn gently extracted her hand, and the tendrils reluctantly retreated. The purring continued, a sound that seemed to exist not just in the audible spectrum, but somehow, in all possible frequencies simultaneously. I think I understand now. Quinn said quietly, it wasn't trying to escape. It wasn't trying to consume everyone who approached, it was trying to connect. She reached into her bag and pulled out the final item. The small box. She placed it on the floor, and slid it toward the containment field. What are you doing? Crex asked nervously. Testing a theory, Quinn replied. If there's one thing cats love more than toys, it's boxes. The darkness contracted, then flowed toward the box like liquid. The containment field stretched to accommodate the movement, and to everyone's astonishment, the entity poured itself into the small box, despite being many times larger. Physics wept quietly in the corner. Once inside the box, the darkness settled, still purring contentedly. The box didn't look any different. It didn't bulge or distort, yet somehow, it now contained an entity that had previously filled a space 20 times its size. Containment field at 100% stability. Dr. Valtor reported, his voice filled with awe. The entity has voluntarily contained itself. Quinn approached the box cautiously and peered inside. What she saw defied description. A darkness that wasn't absence of light but something more fundamental. A gap in reality itself that somehow radiated contentment. I think, Quinn said with a small smile. Your cat just needed the right kind of attention. The purring from the box grew louder, and Quinn could have sworn she heard something almost like a meow. If a meow could contain the harmonic frequencies of a dying star. Phase 5 complete, she announced. The cat has been successfully fed. Fed. The Grand Archivist's confused voice came through the comms. But you didn't give it any sustenance. Quinn laughed softly as she watched a tendril of darkness lazily extend from the box to bat at the tassel she dangled above it. You've been thinking about feeding all wrong, she explained. Some cats don't eat food. They eat attention. The tendril retreated into the box, and the purring continued, a sound that somehow managed to convey both ancient cosmic power and simple feline satisfaction. Absolutely unprecedented. Dr. Valtor exclaimed, his ancient body practically vibrating with excitement as Quinn returned to the observation room. The small box cradled carefully in her arms. In 4 millennia of xenobiological research, no one has ever this defies all established. The implications for interdimensional theory alone. You broke the doctor, Crex observed dryly. He hasn't completed a sentence in approximately 17 minutes. The Grand Archivist approached slowly, his 6 arms held in a formal position of respect. Human Quinn, you have accomplished what generations of the Empire's greatest minds could not. The Emperor himself is en route to witness this miracle. Quinn gently placed the box on a scanning platform. From within, the contented purring continued, punctuated occasionally by sounds that might have been meows, if meows could make laboratory equipment malfunction by their mere existence. It's not really that complicated. Quinn shrugged. You've been treating it like a specimen. A problem to be solved. I treated it like a pet that could theoretically consume a small galaxy. Crex pointed out. Details. Quinn waved a dismissive hand. Cats are cats, even when they're cosmic horrors from the void between realities. The facility had descended into controlled chaos. Scientists from every department had crowded into the observation room, each attempting to run their own scans on the entity, now contentedly nestled in its box. Security personnel maintained a nervous perimeter, weapons drawn, but looking increasingly unsure about what they were supposed to be guarding against. A team of specialists was urgently reverse engineering Quinn's approach, documenting her methods with the reverence usually reserved for ancient religious texts. The theoretical implications are staggering. One scientist was saying to another, if the entity responds to human emotional cues, it suggests a fundamental connection between consciousness and the quantum substrate of reality itself. Or Quinn interjected. Cats just like boxes. Sometimes the simplest explanation is the right one. The scientist blinked at her, clearly struggling with this radical concept. A sudden hush fell over the room as the main door slid open. A procession of elaborately dressed officials entered, followed by a being so draped in ceremonial regalia that Quinn couldn't immediately determine its species. His Imperial Magnificence, Sovereign of the 17 Quadrants, Keeper of the Eternal Flame, Supreme Intellect of the Known Universe, and 37 other titles too numerous to enumerate, announced a herald whose vocal apparatus appeared to be specifically evolved for pompous declarations. Everyone in the room prostrated themselves immediately, everyone except Quinn, who offered an awkward half-bow and a wave. "I'm Quinn, I fixed your cat." There was a collective gasp at this breach of protocol, followed by a sound that took Quinn a moment to identify as laughter. The Emperor, for it was indeed he, removed his ceremonial headdress to reveal a surprisingly ordinary face, distinguished only by its metallic golden skin and eyes that literally twinkled like stars. "So I am told," the Emperor replied, his voice melodious and amused. 4,000 years of the Empire's greatest minds, and a human solves the problem with a box. He pronounced the word as if it were an exotic delicacy. "And toys," Quinn added helpfully. The toys were key. The Emperor approached the box, peering down with undisguised curiosity. "Remarkable. And you believe the creature was simply lonely?" "Not just lonely," Quinn explained. "Cats, Earth cats, anyway, need enrichment. Mental stimulation. Play. Your cat has been floating in a bubble for millennia with nothing to do except occasionally consume whatever unfortunate ambassador wandered too close. So it wasn't trying to destroy my collection, it was trying to play." Quinn shrugged. "Unfortunately, its idea of play tends to involve rearranging matter at the subatomic level." The Emperor studied Quinn with newfound interest. "The Grand Archivist informs me that you have established a connection with the entity that no other being has achieved. It responds to your presence, your voice." "I speak fluent cat," Quinn replied with a smile. "It's mostly about the tone, not the words." "Then I have a proposition for you, Quinn Blackwood of Earth." The Emperor straightened to his full height, which was impressive even without the ceremonial headgear. "I appoint you as the official imperial caretaker of the Whisker Grief." Quinn blinked. "You want me to be your cat sitter? With full diplomatic status, accommodations within the Imperial Palace, and compensation commensurate with the role's importance to galactic security," the Emperor continued smoothly. "The entity is clearly bonded to you. It would be unwise to separate you." As if to emphasize this point, a tendril of darkness extended from the box, wrapping gently around Quinn's wrist in what could only be described as an affectionate gesture. Quinn looked down at the cosmic horror that had somehow adopted her. "Do I get vacation days?" "Naturally, though the entity would accompany you." "Healthcare. Our medical technology can extend your natural lifespan by approximately 300 years. Dental included." Quinn pretended to consider this, though the decision had already been made for her by the purring darkness that refused to release her wrist. "I accept on one condition." The Emperor raised an elegant eyebrow, clearly unaccustomed to conditions being placed on his generous offers. "I get to rename it," Quinn said firmly. Whisker Grief is a terrible name for a cat, even one that exists partially outside conventional reality. A moment of silence followed this bold request, then the Emperor's face broke into a genuine smile. "Agreed. What name would you bestow upon this ancient entity that has confounded the greatest minds of the Empire for millennia?" Quinn looked down at the box, where two impossible eyes had formed in the darkness, gazing up at her with what might have been affection, if affection could bend space-time. "Mittens," she declared. "I'm calling it Mittens." And so it came to pass that Quinn Blackwood of Earth became the first and only human to join the imperial court, with the official title Keeper of Mittens, a position that, while initially mocked by courtiers, quickly became recognized as perhaps the most crucial role in maintaining galactic stability. As for why humans alone could successfully interact with the creature, the answer proved simpler than anyone expected. When Dr. Valtor finally completed his definitive research paper on the subject, its conclusion stated, "After extensive analysis of human neurological patterns, cultural behaviors, and evolutionary history, we have determined that humans are uniquely suited to care for the entity formerly known as the Whisker Grief, due to one critical factor. Humans are the only known species in the galaxy that has evolved alongside domestic cats, They alone understand the fundamental truth that has eluded the Empire's greatest minds. Sometimes, even a being of incomprehensible cosmic power just needs a box to sit in and something dangly to bat around. The paper became the most cited scientific work in Imperial history and launched an entirely new field of study, comparative cosmic pathology, and somewhere in the Imperial Palace, in a room furnished with increasingly elaborate boxes, toys, and perches, Mittens the cosmic horror purrs contentedly as Quinn dangles a tassel above the darkness that isn't quite darkness, a sound that according to the most sensitive instruments in the Empire somehow stabilizes the very fabric of reality itself. Turns out the ancient Egyptians were right all along. Cats really are gods. Some are just more literal about it than others.